Warning, this episode may contain disturbing content, soothing narration, and mild existential dread. Basically, murder ASMR for stressed professionals. Listener discretion is advised. Hell, it might be necessary.
16 arsonists. 16. Not hardened, angry men, not rebellious boys, and not thrill seekers. Girls, teenagers, children. In North Carolina, arson was a capital offense in 1931, punishable by death, and 16 adolescent girls were arrested, jailed, and charged accordingly, and they were all facing death by electric chair.
Whoa! All girls?
All girls.
16 girls charged with arson, faced with the electric chair.
One arsonist is an anomaly. 2 could be a tragic coincidence. But 16 children choosing fire, you have to ask, what exactly were the stakes? Because 16 child arsonists isn't merely crime. It's a crescendo, a scream written in smoke. A signal flare tearing through the night, revealing what polite society refused to see. And when the ashes settled, what remained wasn't an indictment of these girls. It was an indictment of the society that produced them. 16 daughters, 16 children who needed protection. The rot, however, lived not in the accused, but in the upstanding citizens obsessed with purity, order, and moral cleanliness. People who believed cruelty could be justified if it served the greater good. They called it rehabilitation, enrichment, protection. Pretty words for a cage, pretty words for autonomy stolen from children who were simply inconvenient. Good intentions make evil look righteous. Good intentions can make atrocities feel sanitary. So you might ask, why would girls become arsonists? But the real question is what was done to them that fire became the only answer? Because in 1931 in North Carolina, arson meant death row, and 16 girls, children, staring down execution for what was, in truth, a cry for help that no one heard until the fire lit the sky. This was not revenge, there was no financial gain, there was no lust for power. These girls were stripped of autonomy, subjected to cruelty, told it was righteous and just. This was desperation turned incendiary. A signal fire, high, bright, and unignorable. Light thrown across one of the darkest corners of American history. This is the story of the Sweet 16 of Samarcand, North Carolina. 16 girls labeled criminals. The question isn't how they became arsonists. The question is how polite society let evil grow and thrive and masquerade as virtue. And if that same evil still lives today, how long before the flames return? Welcome to Crime to Burn, where we explore the dark city landscape where true crime intersects with arson and criminal negligence. Join us as we sift through the ashes to bring you the story of what really happened. Welcome back to Crime to Burn. I'm April, a fire protection engineer, former firefighter, and the kind of person who wonders what's more dangerous, fire or adults with unchecked authority and a moral superiority complex.
And I'm that feeling of deep regret you get about 3 a.m.
Thank you for joining us this week. We are genuinely grateful that you are here, but we do need a massive favor. We need those 5-star ratings on Spotify and Apple Podcasts especially. Comments, reviews, and that little heart you see, anything helps. Because here's the wild part. Last month, over 4,500 listeners tuned into Crime to Burn, and yet we have fewer than 100 ratings each on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. That means less than 2% of you have left us a rating. And I cannot stress this enough, but that single click, it matters. It is the most helpful thing that you can do to support this show. Each episode we produce takes somewhere around 20 to 30 hours a week to research, write, record, and edit. Sometimes it takes more than that. And we do it because we love making these for you. And all we're asking in return is for 3 seconds. Tap those 5 stars and leave us a written review. And you don't need to write a monologue. You can literally say, great episode or good research. 2 words.
Nice cheese fries.
Nice cheese fries. 2 words or 3 words if you want to go the cheese fries route.
Cheese fries can be hyphenated. Is that 1 word or 2?
I'm not sure. I'm guessing, I thought it was 2. 2 words, 1 sentence, whatever you type, it makes a difference. So thank you for helping us grow, truly. Now, we have not missed a single episode in 80 weeks now. That's 80 Mondays without a break. So that's between 1,600 and 2,400 hours of research, scripting, editing, recording, producing, and everything else that happens behind the scenes with no skips and no weeks off. So please, just do me the simple favor. Leave us a 5-star rating. You can also meet our newest team member over on social media, Wisp, our tiniest fire and arson expert apprentice. She is 1.5 pounds of pure furry chaos, and yes, she knows she's adorable. So go say hi to her on X, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube, and please tell her she's cute. While you're there, she demands it. While you're there, give us a follow, tap those likes, leave us a comment, and share us with your circle. It helps more people find the show, and it keeps Wisp in treats, which is critical to team morale. For those of you who've already joined the Cult of Steve over on Patreon, we are eternally grateful. If you would like to belly up to the sacred snack table, the link is in the show notes. It is optional, but it's also unhinged, and let's be honest, if you are here, you like unhinged. You can also support the show by doing your holiday shopping, or treating yourself, we don't judge, through our Spreadshop merch store. Hoodies, mugs, and chaos. Just take your pick, the links are in the show notes for that too. And finally, you can always send us your case suggestions, feedback, fire stories, or unhinged admiration at crimetoburn@gmail.com. And a big hello to the Lawrence Fire Department in Lawrence, Indiana, Chief Wallace. Someone mentioned your bedside manner hits like a fully charged hose line to the face, but hey, results are results. And seriously, they actually think you're a seriously incredible chief. Now, back to the reason we're here.
Now to take our hands off of Chief Wallace's balls and return you to the story.
Now, back to the reason you're here. To understand how 16 girls ended up facing potential execution in North Carolina in 1931 for arson. Because let's be honest, 16 arsonists in one place isn't bad luck, bad parenting, or even a cluster of psychopathy. 16 is systemic. 16 means something has fundamentally broken. That level of ignition doesn't happen because of a few wild kids. It happens when a system pushes them so far that fire becomes the only language left. Now, before we dive in, I have a confession. I spent an embarrassing amount of time trying to figure out how to pronounce the name of this town, and I am originally from North Carolina, so this should not have been the boss fight of this episode. But after falling down several pronunciation rabbit holes, I finally found a clip on YouTube from North Carolina Book Watch interviewing historian Karen Zipf, who is the author of Bad Girls at Samarcand, Sexuality and Sterilization in a Southern Juvenile Reformatory. And that is where I finally heard it spoken clearly. Samarcand. Not Samarand, not Samarcand, which I did find websites that gave me both of those pronunciations. So if it's wrong, don't complain to me, complain to North Carolina Book Watch.
What was the zip noise you made?
Karen Zipf, Z-I-P-F. is the author of Bad Girls at Samarcand.
But you weren't focusing on that word. You were focusing on a different word.
Samarcand.
Because that's weirder.
I couldn't figure out how to pronounce it.
I don't think you figured out how to pronounce the first one either.
Well, here's the plot twist. I did not get to read Zip's book for this episode.
Doesn't that should be a verb?
Zip.
Yeah, doesn't that sound like you're doing something?
Well, how would you pronounce Z-I-P-F?
I just wouldn't. I'd just call you Z.
All right. So here's the plot twist. I did not get to read Bad Girls at Samarcand for this episode because I did not even know it existed until approximately midnight last night, somewhere around hour 3 of Please God, someone pronounce this town name for me. But I'm going to include it in the show notes, and honestly, I wish I had found it sooner so I could give you a comparison between that book and the one that we're going to talk about. But if you've read it, feel free to email me your thoughts, your opinions, your outrage, your notes, crimetoburn@gmail.com. Now, the book I did read and the primary source for this episode today is called Smoke Signals from Samarcand, the 1931 Reform School Fire and Its Aftermath by Barbara Bennett. That was my foundation, my map through this case. And it is also linked in the show notes if you'd like to follow the smoke trail yourself. And while this story and this podcast is about a fire, the flames aren't really the point here. Just like most true crime cases, the real story isn't what happened, it's why. The motive, the pressure point, the root cause. And here, that root cause is not merely uncomfortable, it is horrific. This wasn't arson for revenge, one of the primary motives we see in arson cases. And it wasn't for money, we also see fraud as a primary motive. And it wasn't to hide another crime. But there is a deeper motive that sits beneath all of those more familiar reasons that we see for arson cases. a thread that winds through nearly every criminal fire that humans have ever chosen to light, and that is control. Even thrill-motivated arsonists, for them it's rarely about chaos. It's really about the rush of power and the control of both creation and destruction. And at Samarcand, the need for control was different. These fires weren't set by people that were trying to dominate others. They were lit by children trying to pull their own autonomy back from a society that had already stripped it away. A society so obsessed with purity and morality that it invited evil to sit at its dinner table with knives and forks and napkins folded, smiling and calling itself righteousness. Now make no mistake, I do not and will never endorse arson publicly.
What?
That's a joke.
I never heard you endorse it privately.
But I think as we move forward, you'll understand my outrage, because I'm not sure these girls had any other choice left to them. This wasn't chaos, it was desperation. And this is a hard story to listen to, but it matters, because the same machinery that produced 16 child arsonists, it hasn't gone silent, it hasn't rusted out, and it hasn't died. It's still humming beneath our feet. So today, we're dragging it into the light, bloody, uncomfortable, and unsanitized, because the lessons of Samarcand, well, they're not finished. Not by a long shot. But to understand how everything unfolded, we need to go back to the evening of March 12, 1931, to the Samarcand Manor Training School for Delinquent Girls, just outside of Carthage, North Carolina. Now, Carthage, and Samarcand along with it, sits in the Sandhills, which is a distinct region of rolling sandy soil in the intercoastal plain of North Carolina. Now, according to the interwebs, because yes, I researched dirt for this episode, the land was formed from some ancient sea deposits, which left it dry, acidic, sandy, nutrient poor. That kind of soil is not great for crops or lush farming, but it's perfect for longleaf pines, which actually depend on those conditions to thrive. And it also happens to be perfect for one other thing: golf. Pinehurst, one of the East Coast's most iconic golf destinations, sits right in this ecosystem, green and groomed where the ground itself won't grow much else. Now, I am not golf people, but apparently many important and wealthy people were, and I don't think it's insignificant that a reformatory for wayward girls was built within driving distance of a playground for the wealthy.
What? It's just like Epstein's golf course?
No, Pinehurst is one of the premier golf courses in the country.
We heard what you just said. What am I supposed to make of that?
I just think that it just is painting a contrast between the life these girls had and the poverty around this area, and then there's this playground for the wealthy built right there just because the soil grows nice grass for fairways. Because this is the 1931. They're just still clawing their way out of the Great Depression.
Oh, Epstein wasn't even born.
Not yet. But Samarcand Manor Training School was no Pinehurst. It was not a playground, and the girls kept there were certainly not wealthy. A scattering of institutional buildings set across the campus, classrooms, administrative halls, and dormitories where the residents, and I am using that word generously, lived under constant supervision and discipline, until one of those dorms burned down on March 12, 1931. Now that evening during dinner, Bickett Hall went up in flames and it burned absolutely to the ground. By the time the local fire department arrived, there was nothing left to save. They pulled hose lines and knocked down what was left and worked out the hot spots, only to keep the embers from spreading into the longleaf pine forest or jumping to another structure on campus. But while firefighters were focused on the ruin of Bickett Hall, smoke began to rise from a second dormitory, Chamberlain. And this was no accidental ember carried on the wind. This fire had authors. 4 girls, Margaret Abernathy, Ollie Harding, Marion Mercer, and Thelma Council, had slipped into Chamberlain while Bickett Hall was burning brightly enough to consume the attention of the students, the teachers, the matrons, and every arriving firefighter. And inside they carried out a plan. They lit a match, touched it to a cotton stocking, and fed it like a burning wick through a small opening near the ceiling that led directly into the attic. An attic that they knew was stacked with boxes of old papers, records, books, basically just dry tinder waiting for a spark. Then they stepped back outside to wait. and they didn't have to wait long. Only about 15 minutes passed before one firefighter spotted the smoke curling from an attic vent in Chamberlain, and crews sprinted up the stairs and managed to stop the fire before it could take the entire building. But the night was far from over. Once Bickett Hall was reduced to smoldering wreckage and Chamberlain's first fire was stamped out, staff faced a new crisis. Where were all the displaced girls going to sleep? Rumors flew like sparks. Girls whispered that maybe they'd be sent home. Maybe their families would be called. But there was no such luck. Instead, the girls from Bickett Hall were redistributed among the remaining dormitories, and already overcrowded rooms were packed even tighter, bodies stacked on cots and on the hard floor, air thick with sweat, the day's excitement, and speculation.
What was going on where they wanted to torch the place?
I'm going to tell you.
Did I miss something already, or?
No, I haven't gotten into what was going on at the school.
Okay.
And for Margaret Pridgeon, time was almost up. She was scheduled for punishment the next day, a whipping for disrespecting a teacher. And she knew exactly what that meant. She would be stripped of her outer clothing, forced to lie face down on the floor while other students were forced to hold her down in place. And then she would be lashed more than 100 times with a hickory stick.
I don't know, why are we beating a lady now?
I haven't explained it all.
I'm not comfortable with beating people with sticks.
I'm not either. You shouldn't be. No one should be.
I want to know why.
And then she would be lashed more than 100 times with a hickory stick while other staff watched. Last time this happened, she landed in the infirmary. And this time, she refused to let it happen again.
The next time it happens, you're all going to land in dude. Like, what the for real?
It's 1931. It happened 100 years ago. So Margaret opened her closet, struck a match, and set the only dress hanging inside on fire. And then she shut the door, stepped back, and waited. But Margaret wasn't alone. Almost simultaneously, girls in 3 other rooms did the same thing. And by 9:15, Chamberlain was burning for the second time that night. And things got worse. Some of the girls who were labeled escape risks, were locked in their rooms after dark. And when smoke was discovered, one girl went to the matron to beg for the keys to free them, but she hesitated, assuming that maybe they were dealing with another small blaze that could be easily controlled and wouldn't turn over the keys. Fortunately, the girls had already prepared for the day that they would need to save themselves. They used pilfered spoons from the dining hall that they'd hidden for just such emergencies and popped open the locks to free the trapped girls.
Yo, I haven't heard anyone say pilfered in a minute. I just wanted to congratulate you on your lexicon.
I like the word pilfered.
I also like it.
Using pilfered spoons hidden for emergencies, they popped open the locked doors to free the trapped girls. When the staff saw the locked rooms being opened, they finally surrendered the keys. A second call was placed to the Carthage Fire Department, but there was a problem. They weren't even back at the station yet. And in 1931, the Carthage Fire Department did not have a radio in the truck. There was no way to reach it when it was out on the road. So the building would continue to burn unchecked until the firefighters returned all the way to the station and got the second alarm and drove back out again. And by the time they arrived, Chamberlain was gone, ruins just like Bickett Hall. 2 fires, 1 night. And this was only the beginning. And here's where the story bends into something that I found truly unexpected. A reform school full of girls labeled as problems, the troublemakers. People called them immoral, said they were criminal. The kind of children that polite society discards when they become inconvenient. So when the adults assembled every student and announced that anyone involved in the fire or anyone who knew about the fire should stand up and walk into the teacher's lounge in Tufts Hall, you would probably expect silence, fear, and denial. They had no proof, they had no witnesses, and they had no reason to confess. But instead, 16 girls stood up and walked forward. 16 girls said they either knew who set the fires or they claimed to have set the fires, and they stood and walked into that room of their own accord. 16 girls united, admitting involvement in one of the most shocking juvenile fires in American history. And those 16 girls would become known as the Samarcand 16. That night, the sheriff came and arrested 6 of them, hauling them to county jail in nothing but their nightgowns, and the next morning he returned to arrest the other 10. They only had 4 jail cells, and by midday, Each one held 4 girls, 4 teenage arsonists. And these girls weren't the only teenagers setting fires that very night, because at the same time flames were rising over Samarcand, 2 buildings burned at the Stonewall Jackson Training School for Boys in Concord, North Carolina. The same state, the same night, at the same kind of institution. And according to the one boy who confessed and implicated another, their motive was simple. He'd been whipped so violently that he set the fires to make the whippings stop. The exact same reason Margaret Pridgeon gave for setting Chamberlain ablaze. 2 reform schools, 2 sets of abused children, 2 arson attacks. All in North Carolina, all on the night of March 12, 1931. A coincidence? Or 2 pressure cookers exploding at the same moment, under the same kind of violence, the same kind of discipline, the same kind of moral righteousness gone feral. To understand why not just 1, but 2 groups of young people lit fires in North Carolina that night, we have to step back, way back. Before Pinehurst was manicured fairways and famous golfers, before Samarcand was a reformatory, when the Sandhills of North Carolina were home to native peoples, including the Catawba and Lumbee Indians, among others, long before white settlers claimed the land. And in native cultures across the North American continent, fire and smoke were more than survival tools. They were communication. They were warnings. They were signals sent up to the sky when danger approached. So fast forward to Samarcand in 1931. To the public, the girls were said to live a pleasant and structured life with schooling, gardening, swimming, the illusion of reformation. But the truth was all filtered through one woman, the matron, Mrs. McNaughton. She was the head matron and the gatekeeper and the sole voice allowed to speak to the outside world. So she crafted the story, and she controlled the image. And when families complained about cruelty reported to them by their children or conditions they were subjected to, the girls reported back to their family that the punishments only got worse and the conditions got worse. And these were poor families. They had no leverage. They couldn't afford lawyers or advocates. And their daughters, sisters, cousins were trapped in a system that saw them as property and not people. And no one was listening. No one wanted to listen. So maybe, just maybe, fire was the only language they had left. Maybe smoke signals were all they had. And as the investigators dug deeper and the trials finally began, the truth started leaking through the cracks. Conditions at Samarcand were not idyllic. They were deplorable. One of the first attorneys to represent the girls visited the school for herself, and immediately she sensed something was wrong. The staff was careful, too careful. Polite smiles stretched too tight, answers delivered like rehearsed lines. So she separated the staff to question them one by one. She interviewed teachers, matrons, away from their supervisors, away from each other, and none of their stories matched. Punishments were described differently. There was contradiction. Accounts of daily life and answers to her questions varied wildly from employee to employee. Now, when 2 stories don't agree, there could be 2 explanations. One is mistaken or one is lying. But when multiple stories exist and they all disagree, well, it seems most likely that several people are lying. So she kept digging and began contacting former teachers and staff who no longer had anything to lose by speaking up. Because it wouldn't be enough for 16 accused arsonists to claim mistreatment. Not in 1931. Not when those 16 weren't debutantes or daughters of influence. Not when they weren't well-bred, well-educated, or socially protected. These were girls that society had already thrown away. And in a world where no one believed them, the system expected that they would just burn quietly. But instead, they lit the fires that no one could ignore. So what were the real conditions at Samarcand? Well, once the attorney began, the truth did not just trickle out, it flooded. Former teachers, medical staff, even food service workers that had left employment at the school began contacting the attorney representing the girls. Letters piled up. Testimonies rolled in, her mailbox filled with accounts of the things they had seen and the things they had not been allowed to say. They described girls being restrained by other students while teachers whipped them, not once or twice, but over and over again. Sometimes with sticks, sometimes with leather straps. More than 100 lashings in a single punishment session was considered normal. Girls left bleeding and bruised so deeply that their skin would turn purple and black. They would be sent to the infirmary for treatment, but simply because they couldn't stand upright afterwards. And even then, even when a child lay broken and shaking, medical staff were reportedly discouraged from offering comfort or any medications to relieve pain.
Yo! Anyone who was near this motherfucker is culpable. Anyone who had any information about this is fucking culpable. Enjoy hell, bitch! There better be a fucking awesome resolution for this. I kind of feel a little bothered by this.
They were to observe and send the girls back when they could walk again and sit properly. This wasn't discipline, it was cruelty, bureaucratic and systemic cruelty hidden behind words like reform and morality. But what about the girls who weren't in constant trouble? What about those who did everything asked of them? Well, they fared little better. They escaped the lashings, but they didn't escape the neglect. Dormitories were overcrowded with many girls not sleeping on cots or mattresses, but on thin blankets spread across hard, splintered wood floors. And even those blankets weren't laundered. If one girl came down with an illness or a rash, the rest of the dorm was guaranteed to follow. Former staff reported cockroach and bed bug infestations so bad the girls lost sleep, clawed themselves raw, and woke up with bites across their bodies. And when girls fell genuinely ill, the infirmary was no refuge. It was just a pause, a stopover where recovery was optional and release was determined by one woman. Even when the doctors insisted a child needed isolation or continued medical care, the final decision rested with one woman, Mrs. McNaughton. Not the physicians, not the nurses, one matron with full authority to override all medical judgments. If she wanted a sick girl returned to the dorms, she went back, whether she carried influenza, typhus, or any other contagious illness. Outbreaks weren't accidents, they were practically policy. And disease spread like flame in a room full of dry blankets, and Samarcand just gave it kindling. These girls were not being rehabilitated, they were surviving containment and brutality. So how did so many girls, hundreds of them, end up in a place like Samarcand? To answer that, we have to walk into perhaps the darkest part of this story. In the 1930s, the country was still clawing its way out of the Great Depression, and poverty was widespread, and fear was currency. And in North Carolina, like many states, they were gripped by a particular belief masquerading as science, a belief that the quality of society depended on who was allowed to reproduce, a belief that poor white girls didn't just represent struggle, they represented risk. They talked about the risks of crime and violence, but that isn't really what this was about. No, the risk was that they might get pregnant. They might contract venereal disease. They might birth more poor white children, or worse, give birth to children of mixed race. To those in power, these girls weren't children at risk. They were a threat vector, a future problem to be corrected, contained, or sterilized. And here's where the horror snaps into focus, because this was not fringe and this was not quiet. This was policy. The idea seemed perfectly logical to the people who allegedly endorsed it. If affluent, educated families produced better children, then poor, uneducated ones must produce lesser children. And if that thought feels familiar, if it feels nauseatingly close to one of history's greatest atrocities, let's just call it what it was. Eugenics. Not in Nazi Germany, though the philosophies were nearly identical, and not whispered underground and not hidden behind closed doors. Here in the United States, it was framed as science, as public health, as improvement of the human race. And North Carolina became one of the most fertile grounds for that ideology to take root, spread, and justify unspeakable decisions, including the removal, containment, and punishment of girls considered undesirable to breed. Samarcand wasn't an accident, it was a symptom. And before anyone assumes that this was just a strange North Carolina problem, a fringe belief contained to one southern pocket, let me stop you right there, because it wasn't. Eugenics was not niche, it wasn't local, it was global. Multiple states adopted policies supporting it. Sterilization boards were formed, and public funding was allocated. And the people backing this ideology weren't obscure, uneducated, or radical. They included names that we were all taught in history class, like Winston Churchill, Alexander Graham Bell, Theodore Roosevelt, H.G. Wells, George Bernard Shaw. These weren't voices whispering from the margins. These were leaders, inventors, authors, presidents. People who had power to shape public opinion and influence policy. People who wrote history books and stood on podiums as examples of greatness. Perhaps this is a good place for a gentle reminder that no person deserves a pedestal. All people have flaws, and no earthly being deserves your worship.
Yeah, that's true.
This belief system was not an outlier. It was a movement marching confidently across America and across the world. And the Samarcand girls, they were simply born at the wrong time into a world that decided the moral, responsible thing to do was not to protect them, but to clean the gene pool of them. Girls viewed by society as dangerous, and to politicians, dangerous girls were disposable. The way it was sold to the public was disturbingly simple. The poor, the ignorant, the socially unfit were draining welfare systems meant to support them. Medical care, food, shelter, these resources, people argued, were allowing the weak to survive and reproduce. And if the goal was to improve society, why support those who, in their view, were weakening it?
Isn't that funny how the Christians end up supporting Darwin?
Then came the quote-unquote science. Researchers began looking for hereditary causes of crime and poverty, and yes, they found a correlation. Families living in generational poverty did produce more children who later committed crimes. But what those studies ignored, intentionally or not, was context. They ignored that children born in desperate homes often had two choices: starve or steal. They ignored cycles created not by genetics, but by environment, trauma, hunger, abuse, malnourishment. But the nuance was stripped away, and what remained became policy, very dangerous policy. These findings were used to justify involuntary sterilization in prisons, state hospitals, and mental institutions. The logic was cold. If degeneracy was inherited, and that is their word, not mine, then the solution was to break the bloodline. Take children from unfit parents, place them in, quote, healthy environments, teach them vocational skills.
Heavy quote.
Re-engineer them into better citizens. Which sounded like social improvement on paper, but in practice, it was state-sanctioned human pruning. Samarcand was not a school, it was a filtration system. And then by 1908, well, that was the year the IQ test was born. And what began as a tool to measure learning quickly became a weapon of classification, a benchmark, not for potential, but for worth to society. Anyone who scored below a certain threshold could be labeled, quote, feeble-minded, unquote. And yes, that was the official term used in state reports and academic papers. Feeble-mindedness, they argued, meant inevitable failure. Low intelligence meant fewer educational opportunities. Fewer opportunities would lead to lower income. Lower income would lead to poverty, and poverty would lead to crime. It was a straight line drawn by people who never bothered to account for circumstance, trauma, hunger, or abuse.
Yeah, but who thought about love? Who loves these people and their families? Like, who cares about all that, man? There's people.
Intelligence was no longer a spectrum, it was a sorting mechanism. And for thousands of children, including the girls at Samarcand, that label became a sentence. So policymakers began searching for ways to stop people deemed inferior from reproducing, and their first idea was almost quaint in its naivety. Marriage laws. Prevent the feeble-minded from marrying, and reproduction would naturally decline, they said. But biology is stubborn, and marriage is hardly a prerequisite for procreation.
People want a bone no matter what, as it turns out, and I feel like we should just continue to bone.
So they moved to the next lever, immigration. Restrict entry from populations considered undesirable, less intelligent, less refined, less white. But even strict borders have limits, and poor Americans were still having poor American children that were also deemed unfit. So the final solution was the most invasive and the most irreversible. Involuntary sterilization. North Carolina, along with many other states, passed laws allowing the state to permanently prevent reproduction in people categorized as unworthy, undesirable, or genetically dangerous to the future of the population.
What the f*** is wrong with you people?
And they could do it when the state was paying for these people's existence, as in they were in state-run institutions like prisons or mental hospitals. And those they didn't sterilize, well, there was another option for them: segregation. remove them from society entirely, place them in institutions, control their bodies, their choices, their futures. So Samarcand wasn't a school, it was a containment strategy. A place designed not to educate, but to filter out.
If you think that you wouldn't perpetrate something like this on another human being, I want you to think, did you ever work at a mental institution? Did you ever work at somewhere that was supposed to help? Did you ever work in one of those places, and what did you do? Did you just do what you were told and believe what you were told about these people? Or did you ever have some real feelings about it? And what did you ever do?
And when involuntary sterilization was challenged, when someone finally stood up and said, this should not be legal, that fight climbed all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. And in 1927, in Buck versus Bell, the highest court in this country ruled that the state did have the right to forcibly sterilize its citizens. The decision wasn't fringe, it wasn't even close. It was an 8-1 ruling. So in the Supreme Court arguments, they presented research where they had studied one family for 3 generations in an attempt to prove that their degeneracy was genetic. And so
that's very scientific.
So Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote the now infamous sentence that still chills the blood. 3 generations of imbeciles are enough, he said. And with that one sentence, the Supreme Court didn't just uphold sterilization, it validated it, cemented it, and gave it legal scaffolding strong enough to support decades of state-sponsored eugenics. And in North Carolina, already fertile ground for this ideology, that ruling was gasoline on an open flame. It meant that the government could decide who was fit to reproduce. It meant that children like the Samarcand girls were not seen as people to protect, but as bloodlines to extinguish. And once the Supreme Court gave its blessing, the net widened fast. Young white women who were sexually active outside of the boundaries of polite society, meaning outside of marriage, were suddenly labeled feeble-minded. Their sexuality wasn't seen as normal adolescent behavior or trauma response or the product of poverty and vulnerability. It was declared evidence of some genetic defect. Officials claimed that their desires came from poor education and inferior heredity. They used their clinical language like moron and hereditarily defective.
That's how I feel about Congress.
Words like that were written into state records and case files as if they were medical diagnosis rather than cruelty dressed as science. So what happened to these girls? Well, they were rounded up. Girls from broken homes, girls who had survived assault, girls who were running away from abuse, girls who became sexually active at young ages, sometimes by choice, but more often not. And instead of being protected, they were contained, sent to institutions like Samarcand under the banner of morals, reform, and righteousness. They were promised education and structure and care. And sometimes that care came in the form of medical procedures. Appendectomies, they were told. Except most of those surgeries were not appendectomies at all. They were involuntary sterilizations, performed on girls who did not consent, didn't understand, and often didn't learn the truth until years later when they tried to start families and discovered that they physically could not. They weren't being reformed, they were being erased. And that sterilization became America's method for dealing with unmanageable white teenagers. Reform them, contain them, or eliminate their ability to create more children like themselves. And that is how Samarcand came to exist, not as a school, but as a horrific solution. By 1924, there were 57 state-funded reform institutions in the United States. Only 2 states did not operate one. Some girls were sent there by parents at the end of their rope. Some were orphans, but the vast majority, their crime was sex. Sometimes consensual, but often not. And while reform schools for boys were equally brutal, the standards were wildly unequal. Boys were not institutionalized for sexual behavior, certainly not at the same rate. Sexual misconduct by boys, especially if it involved poor or black girls, was quietly excused or ignored. Girls were punished for desire. Boys were just encouraged to outgrow it. By 1931, Samarcand held 275 girls ages 6 to 20. Children, teenagers, young women. And 16 of them were hauled out in nightgowns, charged with arson, and threatened with execution. The Samarcand 16. And of those 16, 15 would commit arson again. Not years later, but soon, very soon. Because this story doesn't end with one night of fire. It becomes a pattern, a rebellion, a warning flare. And next week in part 2, we're going to talk about the second uprising and why they did it and how they did it. And why North Carolina was rightfully terrified that it could happen again. Right here on Crime to Burn. Hear the whole thing and then give me feedback.
Are you telling me how to do my job?
Chief,
I will give you feedback right this. Go ahead, say something else.
Chief.
I think you. Everybody thinks you're f***ing awesome. The sun shines up your asshole. How do you accuse a boomer of having autism?
It's already been a day here at Crime to Burn Studios. We've had a chicken in the house today.
Yes, Miss Cinnamon.
Yeah, she had to get a bath, which is not something we normally do for our chickens.
Oh, she had the pasty squatty butt.
Yeah, and the dog wanted to help give Cinnamon a bath.
He mostly wanted to put her feet in his mouth.
Yeah, he did. He wanted to taste the chicken toes.
I hear that's a delicacy some places.
Some places.
I'm curious to see if I can read anything that I wrote. Basically, the only thing I'm allowed to send in the mail anymore. I may have been the only firefighter to achieve the rank of probationary until further notice indefinitely. No, I was just roasting myself. I did actually some pretty heroic after that, but I was banned from using the flame emoji. Yeah, you can actually post enough flame emojis that it starts to actually light the internet on fire. When I was working at the fire department, though, I was told, if you don't know what to do, don't do anything at all. And that saved my life more than once, like outside of the fire department. The truth is, I joined the fire department because I was threatened with an invoice.
I know, yeah, I did know that.
It's kind of like the last minute science fair thing you do. Mm-hmm. Maybe you don't do it, but I did.
Science fair was my favorite time of year. I still got second place, even though I almost started a fire. This is why you don't let third graders play with fire.
This is why you don't let third graders play with fire. Speak for yourself.
And one year I made a working telegraph machine.
Who'd you communicate with? Alexander Graham Bell?
No,
Ghost?
just the other side of the room. The problem was we didn't know what size battery we needed to make this work. And so my dad bought like one of those big batteries. It wasn't a car battery. I don't know what it was.
6-volt battery.
Yeah, maybe.
It's got the springs on top.
Yeah.
6-volt battery.
That was too much. Burned bad. My whole arm was numb for like 2 days.
Really?
Yeah. If you're not sure what size battery you need for your science fair project, start small and work your way up. Don't go the other way.
It's all about the amps.
Or as Megan Trainor says, it's all about that pace.
I don't know who that is.
I wouldn't expect you to. It's not really your genre of music. You sounded like you were in physical pain.
Like I was letting you have the boat at the end of Titanic?
Yes.
This is like the most vanilla way I could follow in the footsteps of my ancestors. I'm not a cult member, but I am a cult leader.
Right. Yeah. We did step that up a little. But our cult's not nefarious. It's just
It's
snacks.
not nefarious. We got nothing on the Moonies. We got nothing on the Presbyterians. We got nothing on the Lutherans.
Oh, you're going to get us in trouble with everyone, aren't you?
We got nothing on the Baptists. We got nothing on the Catholics.
Speaking of
We got nothing on the Unitarians.
Speaking of Catholics.
We got nothing on the Church of Christ. We got nothing on the Mormons.
My dad doesn't look that much like the
Your
Pope.
dad looks exactly like the Pope.
He doesn't have any tall hats.
Every try to hump his leg once in a while.
Winston's especially fond of him.
And he ironically hasn't tried to hump his leg.
The ritual may now begin. 16 arsonists.
And a partridge in a pear tree.
Last month, over 4,500 listeners. Bleh.
Over 4,500 listeners retched on command.
Last month, Odie.
Odie? When you hyphenate something, does it make it one word?
I think so.
Just say cheese fries like 5 times and it doesn't matter if you hyphenate it or don't.
Because it stops making sense. Cheese fries.
The word has no meaning to me anymore. Nothing attracts a crowd like a crowd.
Also, give us a follow, tap those likes, leave a comment, and share us with your circle. It helps more people find
Your
the show.
circle?
With your circle.
George Circle?
And for those of you who've already joined the Cult of Steve over on Patreon, we are that says eternally, not externally.
We are ex post facto.
We are externally grateful.
Epidermally grateful.
You can also support the show by
squirting. Just anytime you're by yourself.
By stepping all over the audio. Back to the reason you're here. To understand how 16
feel pain, because I can't feel anything else. We crossed the line somewhere a magnitude ago.
Yeah.
That should be a verb.
I did not get to read Bad Girls at Samarcand.
.com.
God, this episode's going to be a nightmare to edit. And for Margaret Pridgeon...
It sounds like a pigeon with an R. I just sit up straight, like a proud man. Proud man. You can't hurt me with your podcasting. I will destroy you.
That they might contract venereal disease. That they might give birth to more poor white children, or worse.
Rules!
What? There's one particular family that had been studied for 3 generations to prove that degeneracy was genetic.
The Partridge family.
Probably them.
The Partridge. It was definitely the Partridge family.
With those 6 words, the Supreme Court didn't just uphold sterilization, it validated it. I counted twice. 3 generations of imbeciles are... Damn it! Fuck. 3 generations of imbeciles are enough. 3 generations of imbeciles are... It is 6 words! Because I thought I might go get a shower because I feel like I still smell like chicken butt.
Well, there's a chance of that. We did wash a lot of chicken butt.
We did.
There's fruit in there technically, but it ain't really a salad. Chestnuts roasting on an open fire. Your balls blowing in the breeze. I think people probably underestimate the value of shaming your robots.
This episode is brought to you by Ambrosia Salad, proving once again that the limit of human innovation is, what if we had fruit, but wetter? Have you ever had ambrosia salad in popsicle form?
I forgot that I put it in the freezer. But we decided it was actually delicious and something that we could put in a cone.
Jet Puff should sponsor us. I love marshmallows. Not fucking marshmallows. I just love marshmallows.
I like to marshmallow from time to time myself.
I should have said I fucking love marshmallows. I'm not sticking a marshmallow there, but I will fill my mouth with them.
Now I'm horny.
I almost choked on a marshmallow when I was in high school.
Now I'm more horny. If you lick a marshmallow, you can put it pretty much anywhere you want. They're sticky. Hydrate or combust. More scolding! The scoldings will continue until we have reached conclusion. Thanks for listening. Go be safe, be curious, and if something catches fire this week, make sure it's metaphorical, or at minimum, insured. And this concludes tonight's chaos. Pet something soft, question authority, and eat a carb. Crime to burn out.
I thought that said eat a crab. Crime to Burn is a production of Crime to Burn, LLC, where we light fires in your brain and not your buildings. All rights reserved. Still spiritually parched after this episode? It's okay, Steve believes in cross-pollination. Here's a trailer for a show we think deserves to infiltrate your ear holes, in a good way. Don't forget to leave a 5-star review before you go. Steve is watching.
Looking for your next true crime podcast? Then consider checking out my show, Truly Twisted, wherever you get your podcasts. Hi, my name is Alicia Watson, and each Thursday I will be bringing you a twisted story that is always victim-focused and fact-based. My goal is simple, bringing a voice to the voiceless. So be sure to follow me on Instagram and TikTok at It's Truly Twisted. And for more on my show and other amazing creators, visit fireeyesmedia.com. And in the meantime, remember, you are wanted, you are loved, and you deserve to be here. And I'll see you there.
Fire Eyes Media.